What's going on, guys? It's Paul here, and as I've mentioned in previous videos, I live in the southeastern United States, which means that's where I do most of my backpacking, which means that throughout the course of a year, I tend to battle hot weather way more often than I do cold weather. For example, heat index today, 101 degrees Fahrenheit. And since none of us have time for a heat stroke, in this video I'm going to be sharing some tips and some gear options for your next hot weather backpacking trip. I also want to say a quick thank you to Backcountry for making this video possible. The very first tip is to know your trail. Before you can even start planning out your gear, you need to know what to expect. So you need to know things like, will you be in direct sunlight most of the time, or will you be in the shade? How often will you see a water source? How reliable is that water source? What's the terrain and the elevation change? All of these things are going to factor into the gear that you need to carry on your trip. If you set out on a backpacking trip in hot weather and the only thing you really know is your starting point and your ending point, you can really quickly be placed in a dangerous situation. So unless you're already really familiar with the trail where you'll be hiking, make sure to do some research ahead of time, read some recent trail reviews. You can even oftentimes contact a local ranger station and they can give you some good details. Just make sure that you know what you're getting into. And along with that, the next tip is do not skimp on water. I know that as backpackers, we tend to obsess over every ounce of weight, and water is heavy, but when it's so hot outside that you're pouring sweat even when you stop to take a break, that is not the time to skimp on water. Now, as for the amount of water that you need to carry with you, it's going to really depend on your individual needs and all of those trail variables that I mentioned earlier. But for me, I've found that in the hotter months, I tend to go through a liter of water about every 2 to 3 miles. So for example, I just did a backpacking trip this past weekend, and I knew that there was going to be about a 6-mile stretch between reliable water sources. So I carried 2.5 liters of water, and that worked out really well. In addition to your water, when you're pouring sweat, you're going to be losing a lot of electrolytes. So it's a good idea to carry something to help replenish those. I typically carry something like a Gatorade powder or these little electrolyte tablets that I just mix into my water bottle. You can also find things like electrolyte gels and chewable tablets. There are a lot of options out there. Just make sure that you carry something to replenish your electrolytes. Now, in transitioning to talking about gear, one thing that I carry on almost every backpacking trip, whether it's hot or not, is one of these small pack towels. And I carry one of these. I started carrying one so that whenever my tent is wet, I can just kind of wipe it down before I pack it up in my bag. But when it's hot, you can carry this like in your side pocket or somewhere where it's easy to get to without taking your pack off. And what I'll do with that is anytime I come across a water source that has that nice ice cold mountain water, even if I don't need to stop and filter water, I'll just dip this thing down in the water, get it soaked, nice and cold. I can wipe my face off if I want to, and then I'll just drape it around my neck and keep hiking. Trust me, you will feel like $1,000,000. You'll be ready for another 10 miles. Maybe not 10, but you'll be good to go. These things only weigh like 2 ounces. They are well worth it. Now, something very important to discuss when we're talking about backpacking in hot weather is your clothing. And if you're going to be in direct sunlight, you definitely want to carry some type of sun hoodie. This is my North Face Hyperlayer FD, which is so incredibly comfortable that I tend to wear this around the house even when I'm not going to be outside. This thing is super light, it's breathable, it's stretchy, very comfortable, and a sun hoodie is just going to help keep the sun off of your neck, your ears, your arms, head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Now, if you're in the market for a sun hoodie, you can do a quick search on backcountry.com. In this case, I'm looking for men's clothing, and I like to sort by highest rated and then scroll down to find something in my budget range. For example, there's my North Face hoodie, and they also happen to have the Echo on sale right now, which is another good option. If you need any help selecting the right gear for you, you can always chat with one of the Backcountry gearheads. I have personally utilized the gearheads in the past, and I can attest to the fact that when you talk to them, you're talking to a real person, they know their stuff, and they provide great customer service. So check out Backcountry at the link in the description below, and thank you Backcountry for sponsoring this video. Next up in our discussion about clothing, if I'm not going to be in direct sunlight the entire time, Then I'm going to be wearing this shirt. This is a Columbia Silver Ridge Light. It does not have a hood, so it's not a sun hoodie, but it does still have that built-in sun protection. And it's just a very light, thin, breathable shirt, so it's great for hot weather backpacking. As you can see, it is a button-up shirt, so it adds some nice ventilation in the front here. It does have these vents in the back, if you can see that. Those vents don't really do anything while you have your pack on, but when you get to camp, you take your pack off. Those vents help a lot with cooling you down and drying off your sweaty back. This one is, however, a long sleeve shirt. They do sell this in a short sleeve version, but the reason I like this is that when I'm hiking, I can roll up the sleeves. It has this little loop right here, so you can button the sleeves up. You don't have to worry about them rolling down while you're hiking. And the reason that I like that is that when you're in hot weather, it doesn't just mean heat. That also comes with oftentimes overgrown trails, so you're hiking through brush, and especially here in the southeast, mosquitoes. So typically what I do is that while I'm on the trail during the daytime, I have the sleeves rolled up just because it's a little bit cooler. And then when I get to camp that night, if the mosquitoes are really bad, then I can unroll that sleeve, and I only have to put bug spray on like the back of my neck and my hands. So the key to hot weather backpacking is gear that is adaptable, and that is why I use these hiking pants in hot weather. These are the Patagonia Quandaries. They are very light and breathable pants. They're also super stretchy, so they're very comfortable for hiking in. And as you can probably see, these are zip-off pants. So similar to what I was saying about the sleeves with the shirt, if I'm hiking during the day, then typically I have the pant legs zipped off, so I'm just hiking in shorts. It's much cooler that way. And then when I get to camp at night, if the mosquitoes are really bad, I can just zip the pant legs on and my legs are covered. Next, let's talk about gear at camp. I'm not going to go in depth about shelters, but just to briefly cover that. Typically, a hammock is going to be a little bit cooler than a tent, sometimes too much so, but if you sleep well in a hammock, that might be a good option for you. I've mentioned before on the channel that I just do not sleep well in a hammock. I'm a ground dweller through and through, so it's going to be a tent for me. I'll link a couple of options below if you're looking for a tent, but ultimately in a shelter in the hot weather, you're just looking for something that has a lot of ventilation to allow a little bit of a breeze at night. Now, even trickier than selecting a shelter for hot weather is selecting your sleep system. So I'll show you what I've found to work really well for me. First of all, with my sleeping pad. This, I've mentioned how much I love this sleeping pad before. It's my Climate Insulated Ultralight SL. So yes, this is an insulated sleeping pad. It has an R value of 4.4. In the hotter months, you could really get away with an uninsulated sleeping pad, especially if you're using a sleeping bag with it. But I typically use a down quilt, and the quilt combination with this sleeping pad, I found it to not be too warm. So it is slightly heavier than the uninsulated version, but the benefit to this is that it's going to last you more months out of the year than one that's non-insulated. So definitely a good sleeping pad option to check out. I sleep really well on it, and they're not too badly priced either. And the next thing that I'm going to have on top of the sleeping pad is a silk liner. If you hear nothing else that I say in this video, hear this. If you are going to be backpacking in hot weather, get yourself a silk liner. This particular liner is the Rab Neutrino silk liner, and this thing weighs just a couple of ounces. It packs down super, super small, and the reason that I say, or the multiple reasons that I say to use a silk liner for hot weather is, first of all, that typically when you first get in bed at night, it's still really warm outside. You've been moving around, so you're still producing a lot of body heat, and it's just too hot to get directly into a sleeping bag or get under your quilt. So that's where this guy comes in. I'll get just directly into the liner, and it's just a slight little thin covering over you. It's still really cool. And most of all, this material feels so much better, so much more comfortable than just having your sweaty body directly on this sleeping pad material. But not only is a silk liner more comfortable, the other reason to use one of these is that oftentimes when you get into your sleeping bag at night after a day of hiking in the hot weather, you're nasty, sweaty, you've got bug spray and sunscreen caked all over you, and it is not fun to wash that stuff out of a down sleeping bag or a down quilt. So when you're using this as almost a protective layer between you and your quilt, then this is just a lot easier to wash whenever you need to. Now, speaking of a sleeping bag, this is the Marmot Micron 50. I don't know if you can read that, but this is my warm weather sleeping bag slash quilt. And I say bag slash quilt because it does have a full length zipper, so you can zip it up just like a sleeping bag. But that zipper does run all the way around the bottom of the foot box. So if you want to, you can unzip the entire thing and just use it like a blanket. That's typically how I use it when I'm using it in combination with that insulated sleeping pad. But if your feet tend to get cold, you can just leave the bottom little bit of the foot box zipped up and use the rest as a quilt. The insulation is a 650 fill power water resistant down, so it does pack down really small, pun intended. It's also very lightweight, and both the shell and the lining are very soft, so it's a super comfortable bag, great for warmer weather. And I really like that if the temperature does drop a little bit lower than what you were expecting, it does have that full length zipper, so you can zip it up all the way. It has a baffle around the zipper, lining the zipper, so it keeps any heat from escaping there. And there's also this drawstring around the neck opening, so you can trap the heat in that way. Overall, excellent, comfortable bag for warmer weather. And last but certainly not least for hot weather backpacking is safety. Anytime that you're backpacking in extreme conditions, whether that's extreme heat or extreme cold, things can get dangerous really, really quickly. And oftentimes we do not have cell signal when we're out there. So that's where I recommend carrying some type of GPS communicator, such as the Garmin InReach Mini. This thing is excellent because you can set up waypoints ahead of time. So if you want to set up waypoints to, say, your water sources, then if you happen to run out of water, you can figure out how far you are to the next water source. You can also communicate with friends and family just to let them know you're okay. And perhaps most importantly is that it has this little SOS button on the side here. You open that up and you can hold that button down, and within a few seconds you'll be communicating with search and rescue. So it's really a good idea to have something like this on every backpacking trip, but especially if you're going to be in extreme conditions, I would consider something like this essential. So those are my tips and gear recommendations for backpacking in hot weather. If you have additional tips that I didn't mention in this video, please feel free to share those in the comments section below. If you found this content helpful, you can give the video a like. It really helps out the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.